The establishment of a biblical family under Yahweh's covenant begins with Abraham, whom he calls to leave his homeland and follow his guidance. In return, Yahweh promised to make Abraham the father of a great nation. This covenant was marked by promises of land, numerous descendants, and blessings for all nations through his lineage. Abraham's faith and obedience was pivotal, leading to the birth of his son, Isaac, who continued the covenant. Isaac's son, Jacob, later named Israel, fathered 12 sons who became the 12 tribes of Israel. This family, chosen by Yahweh, was destined to uphold laws and reflect his glory, serving as a beacon of faith and a testament to divine promises fulfilled through generations. I'm Dr. Ray, and welcome to this week's Hosea International Speaks. Chapter 30 of Genesis, we see the establishment of the family of Abraham through Jacob and his 4 wives. Jacob is now beginning in this chapter to feel and have a taste of his own medicine when Laban beguiled him by exchanging Leah for Rachel on Jacob's wedding night. You can see that back in Genesis chapter 29, verse 25. The Jerusalem Bible uses this word beguile, while other translations use deceive. It's the Hebrew word ramah. And what is implied here is an arrow being shot through the heart. So we can understand exactly what Jacob is now feeling when he was deceived and when he had deceived Esau, his brother, and his father. Maybe the arrow that was shot through their heart. It was what he had sown all of his life, and now maybe it was Yahweh beginning to remove the head of the serpent that had taken hold of Jacob when he was in his mother's womb. Remember, it was Jacob that grabbed the hold of Esau's heel when they were being delivered on their birthday. Jacob didn't want to be left out. Just kidding. When Jacob did finally get the woman he wanted, Laban gave each of his daughters a maid to go along. It was customary to give the bride a handmaid who became her confidential servant. In both cases in which Leah received and then Rachel received, you can see that in Genesis 24:59 and 24:61. This would lead up to Jacob having to wed 2 more times just to satisfy Rachel's desire to have children, because up to this point, she was barren. The scripture says this, that she envied her sister. And it came to the point that because she was unable to have children, with her own words said, "Give me children, or else I die." These words infuriated Jacob, and his answer was, "Am I in the place of Elohim?" I think we are getting into the thinking of Jacob just a little. He's finding out that the world does not orbit around him, but that this earth is Yahweh's. And let's not forget that this whole family needed some working on so that Yahweh could have a holy convocation of fellow countrymen. The Hebrew word that we learned a couple of sessions back called kahal amim. It is here that begins the inclusion of the maids given to Leah and Rachel in order to bring about the children needing to fulfill the word given to Abraham by Yahweh when he says this in Genesis chapter 12, verse 2, "And I will make of you a great nation, and I will make your seed as the dust of the earth." Let's look at the first handmaid that was given to Jacob. Bilhah, that was Rachel's handmaid, married Jacob and she gave birth to Dan. Rachel has seen not as judgment against her, but as Yahweh has vindicated her, because the word Dan means to vindicate or to bring judgment against. But Yahweh has vindicated her now in this case and names the son Elohim has judged me, or he has vindicated me. The Hebrew word here is Danai. You can see that, or Danani, or Danny in the English. This would be Jacob's fifth son, Rachel and Bilhah's first son. When a tradition is carried out such as Rachel did, it was customary that the maid's child would give birth on the knees of the barren woman. And this is exactly what happened. To picture that, I don't know how that would have happened, but I can see just that. But even though Rachel felt like Yahweh judged or vindicated her, she also felt that Yahweh has also heard her voice. She says this, Yahweh has also heard my voice, my call. And she says this in chapter 30, verse 6, he has given me a son. It is almost like adoption, you could say. But in these cases that it followed, it might have been just that, adoption. According to Near East or ancient East tradition, a barren woman could utilize various legal precedents as means to secure her future. In other words, when she had the baby born on her knee, she was securing her future. One of the options available for a barren wife is to encourage her husband to take a second woman, often as a wife. And this is what Rachel utilized. Bilhah gave birth to Jacob's fifth son, as we said, and Rachel named him Dan. And then again, Bilhah gave birth to Jacob's sixth son, and Rachel named him Naphtali, which means I have prevailed. The two boys born to Bilhah were Rachel's sons, so it was her responsibility to bring him up in the tradition of the house. And because she had a maid, in other words, Bilhah, it was also her responsibility to do all the cleaning and stuff, and also helping with the upbringing of the child, according to house rules. When Leah stopped bearing, she also utilized the tradition by giving her maid to Jacob to be his wife, thereby giving him a fourth wife. Leah would later give birth to two more sons. In other words, she would birth them herself. And with the jostling around by Rachel and Leah, this was done in order to find favor with Jacob. We can see that they are trying to win Jacob over. And with this, in one situation, we can read this, that we read here, Rachel used what we know today as a quid pro quo, or something for something. And what was that something for something? She says, in this case, it was Leah's sons, Reuben's mandrakes, that would be used as the bargaining chip. And this was in return that Jacob would sleep with Leah, or that day spend time in her tent. You know, that each of the women had their own tents. And so that's what it seemed, that Jacob would now visit Leah in her tent. And then to add insult to injury, Leah gets pregnant and births Jacob a ninth son, or Leah's fifth. She named him Issachar, or Yahweh has given me my wages for giving my maid away. In other words, she probably didn't like giving her maid away, and that her maid also gave birth to boys. And so she named him Zebulun, or exalted. By her own words, Elohim has endowed me with a good dowry. From this chapter alone, we see the never-ending feud between two sisters that probably began before Jacob ever showed up on the scene. And if he was going to be with Laban for any length of time, he, Laban, didn't want two sisters feuding, then Jacob having to just pick up and leave. So this might have been the reason for Laban marrying off Leah first and then Rachel. We know by scriptures that it was by Yahweh's hand on Jacob and Jacob's own words that Laban prospered. Because Laban said this, that Jacob said this, I have learned by the signs that Yahweh has blessed you since my coming. You can see that in chapter 30, verse 30. Jacob would now be looking to push out on his own, so he asked Laban to release him from his oath and allow him to start his own family away from here. Perhaps Yahweh was prodding Jacob that it was time to return to his homeland, and we'll read about that in the next chapter. For he said to Laban, send me away. This is what Jacob said to Laban, his uncle. Send me away that I may go to my own place and to my country. We see that he was getting a bit homesick. And we can see from the wives and that they were being vocal about their father taking away their inheritance. We'll see that also in chapter 31, starting with verse 13. Remember now what Jacob had covenanted with Yahweh before leaving Beersheba. Yahweh says to Jacob, and we can see that in chapter 28 again, if you want to go back, and 13, verse 13 and following. Remember now what Jacob covenanted. This is what he says. Yahweh was standing there beside him saying, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. And I will give you and your offspring the land that you are now sleeping on. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth. This is what he's speaking to Jacob. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out toward the west, the east, the north, and the south. Remember the words that he gave to Abraham. He told Abraham when Lot left him, he says, now look toward the north, south, east, and west. All of this I have given you. Then he tells him, walk the land. And then he continues with Jacob. All the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Look, I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised to you. And then we jump to verse 20. Then Jacob made a vow. If Elohim will be with me and watch over me on this journey, if he provides me with food to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safely to my father's house, then Yahweh will be Elohah, my God. You can see that in Genesis chapter 28, verses 13 through 15, and then also from 20 and 21. Well, we're going to pick up right here next week, and we'll look at Jacob's conniving deception against Laban. You'll be interesting to see what happens here. Well, if you enjoyed this week, go ahead and hit the like button, probably right about here. And if you haven't yet subscribed, now is as good as ever. You can write me also at Hosea International at yahoo.com or Hosea Speaks at gmail.com. And you can also give by scanning either one of the QR codes that are up on your screen now. If you need to, go ahead and stop it, pause it, and then go ahead and scan them, and then you can give that way. I'm Dr. Ray, and I'll see you next week on Hosea International Speaks.